Hey, what's up guys, and welcome to the January vanilla Patreon tutorial. Now, I actually did a poll just recently about which tutorials you guys watch on Patreon, and not one of you said vanilla only, most of you said both, and a lot of you also said add-ons only. So that kind of told me that most of you are using actually all of you are using add-ons, but enjoy seeing the vanilla workflow. So what I think I'm going to do is demonstrate a piece I made on my YouTube using add-ons, this little sci-fi device piece. It was, let me see if I can pull it up real quick. This one right here, some of you may have seen it on my channel. So it seems like a lot of you enjoy seeing the vanilla technique. So what I think I'll do is show how I would have attacked this specific piece in Vanilla Blender. And on top of that, since I didn't actually do a tutorial on rendering this thing and doing posts and whatnot, I think I'll do that in this tutorial, so that way you're getting a little bit of a bonus as well. I'm also thinking about maybe starting, since most of you, aren't super concerned with pure vanilla tutorials, I'm thinking of doing something more concerned with general modeling techniques that you can use in your add-on workflow, but that are technically vanilla strategies. So with that being said, let me know what you guys think. If I kind of want to, gear all these tutorials more towards the Patreon users, right? So whatever gets you the most amount of value, let me know. So like I said, I've already done a tutorial on that piece on my YouTube. So for those of you that want to see the add-on tutorial, it's on my YouTube. But yeah, lots of you want to see vanilla techniques. So I think this would be a really good complement for those of you interested. So what we're going to do to approach this in Vanilla Blender is we're going to make a cube and just kind of move it up here. Let me also turn on my screencast keys because this add-on sucks. I mean, it works, but it's always resetting and or not working. Anyways, what we're going to do is start with a simple cube, and maybe what we'll do is scale it on the X maybe to 0.2 and grab this up on the Z-axis 0.5 units. So now we basically have, it's probably a bit too high. Let's go right to here. So now we basically have this, and this is probably enough, maybe a bit longer. I think this will suffice right here. Okay, so what we need to do now is use a cutter, and obviously in Vanilla Blender what we need to do is use something more custom. So we're going to start with a cube, and I'm actually going to use this cube as a cutter, but if you don't like doing that, what you could do is go to Edit and then Preferences, and under Add-ons, let me actually turn off these two. If you type in Extra and turn on the Add Mesh Extra Objects add-on, we can actually press Shift A and add in a single vert, and just use this as a custom cutter. I think this will actually be easier, so we're going to go ahead and do that. So let me go ahead and hop to the front view and make sure this is, oops, the wrong side. Okay, right here. Let's make sure it's over here. What we're going to do is extrude, wrong side, there we go. Extrude that. We're going to extrude up, going to extrude over, back, and select everything and press the A key and F to fill it, and simply extrude back this way. Very, very easy. So at this point, what we're going to do is come in here and bevel these two edges, because we're going to use this here as a cutter. So we can just make, quite a few edges in there. Might be a bit too many. There we go. And I'm just going to shift click on this guy and make sure you have the bool tool add-on turned on. So BOOL, make sure this guy is turned on. And then what we can do is simply come in and press Control// to run a slice. So we're going to turn this slice into an inset boolean, but if you've used inset booleans in Vanilla Blender, you know how awful they are. So you can you can go ahead and attempt it on your own. I'm going to do a different trick though. So for those of you that attempt the inset boolean in Vanilla Blender, I actually found a really good site right here, psychologytoday.com. So after you do that, you'll probably need a therapist. So this site actually allows you to put in your zip code and city, whatever, and it'll find a therapist in your area. So you're probably going to need this site if you attempt it in Vanilla Blender, but if you want to avoid this hassle here, what we can actually do is use the way I do it. So after we run the slice, we need to go in here and simply apply the slice. Now we can't right now because this is sharing the same data, these two objects. So to fix that, we're going to go in here and turn this, click on that number, and we're going to apply. Might as well apply this one as well. And what I'm going to do, scale that in just a bit, and this basically gives you the same result, a little bit more finicky, but basically gives you the same result an inset boolean would give you without the headache. So after we do that, we can simply bevel that piece right there. It's probably good enough. And let's also right click and make a new collection and call it cutters. Turn it off, including the rendering, and then select it and press the M key to move this to the cutters collection. Okay, awesome. One thing I actually did forget to do though, yeah, that might be a problem. You know what? I did forget to bevel the top, so what I'm going to do, just real quick, is let me undo this. It's going to be the same, it's not going to be like a big deal fixing it. I want to make sure these are beveled here, so let me apply the scale and then just bevel these. I just forgot to do it. Select everything and then merge by distance. Okay. And then of course we just shade smooth and turn on auto smooth. My apologies, but basically same idea. It's going to be really quick to fix. Run a slice, apply the slice, make sure this is clicked, and we'll just go ahead and apply the slice. Really easy fix. We didn't, get too far out of our way. I'm going to scale that in, scale that a bit on the X, and there we go. Okay, so that fixes the problem. But we can't really chamfer this anymore, so what I'm going to do is add this cutters collection back. I'm going to move this guy to the cutters collection, get rid of it real quick. We'll just add in another cube, rotate it 45 degrees, and just use this as a more custom cutter, maybe a bit too steep. Let's try this. And then run a difference boolean like that. That should be good. Move this to the cutters collection and a bit higher maybe. Yeah, that'll be good. And then here on the front, I also want to run a nice little bevel. Something like that should be okay. Alright, so at this point we need to come in here and add in another cylinder. We'll do 64 vertices, that's just my usual number. Shade it smooth and then turn on auto smooth. Rotate it 90 degrees over the Y, and we're going to make a simple cut right in here. And then if we just come in here and shift click on this piece, we can run a difference boolean. Now I don't actually want a hole in here, I just want a very slight solidification, so I'm going to go ahead and add a solidify modifier to this piece only. So we'll add a solidify modifier, we'll make it like 0.02, that should be good enough. Maybe even, let's see, yeah, 0.02 is fine. And then what I want to do is move this to the cutters collection and simply apply the boolean. And if we tab into edit mode here, we can easily press the L key to select the linked geo. In this case it's a separate object, and we'll just press P and separate it by selection. Alright, so that looks good. I also want to make sure we maybe chamfer it a bit. It's probably, need to apply the scale, don't we? Let's check the scale. It's uniform, so what I'll do is scale this up a bit, apply the scale, and then it's still a bit too much, just a little bit. Apply the scale, and then we'll go ahead and bevel, and that is what I was going for. Let me turn cavity back on. There we go, precisely what I wanted on this piece. Okay, so before we really do anything else major, let me go ahead and add an inset boolean here in the front, which, we're just going to do the cheating way because it's infinitely easier and less stressful. So we're going to go in here, control /, and that should be probably enough. And what we're going to do is simply take this piece, scale it a bit on the X, and then scale it a bit in, and that should be perfect. We'll move this guy to the cutters collection, and there we go. Okay, so now we have the base layout going on here, which is precisely what we want, so no real problem on this one. So what I'm going to do is add in another cylinder with Shift A, add in a cylinder. You know the drill, shade it smooth, auto smooth, and then just going to scale it down. And I want to position this guy right in here. So this should probably be a good location. Make sure it has some buffer for when we add a bevel, meaning it needs some room between the edges there. Anyways, that's good enough for me. And maybe we'll just come in here and inset, extrude that back. Perfect. And then what I want to do is simply add in a curve, and then we're going to add in a path curve. Now this one's going to give us a lot of versatility because we can simply rotate this 90 over the Y. Scale this down a bit. A little bit more, and what I want to do, put it right to about here, and if we extrude this piece, we can bring it up in here, and we might need another subdivision. So if we select these two and right click subdivide, can probably kind of, you know what, it might be easier to go in here first and go to geometry under the curve settings and give it a little bit of depth so that way we can actually work with this. Might be easier to move this up a bit and then this up a bit, so that way we really have, you know, more versatility here. Just trying to find a good position, but it's still kind of skewed. Okay, a bit too tight. Let's go ahead and add in one more so that way we have a bit more buffer, and now it's a lot more, you know, uniform and kind of nicely flowing into that piece. Move this a bit to the right, and then yeah, I think that'll be good. Maybe make the solidification a bit bigger. We'll go to depth, and then let me get to the front here. Check this. I think that's good. Perhaps a bit too much. There we go, that's good enough. And obviously I want this piece to go into something, right? So I'm going to add in a cylinder, and we're going to go ahead and shade smooth the cylinder, auto smooth, and we could just eyeball this, or if you wanted to, you could, you know, just like align it to the cursor on that piece, but I think it's way easier to just align this piece. And simply move this down a bit. Inset until it kind of encapsulates that piece. And what we could even do is make this even more accurate. Now you can kind of see this pipe here is really blocky, so it might be a good idea to add a subsurf. So we're going to press Control 2 to add that in, and now we have a much better idea of how this is going to look. So we're going to extrude that down. It's probably a little bit more we could do. S, Shift Z, extrude, chamfer. Boom, there we go. Looks good. Awesome, so I'm pretty happy with the results so far. We got the general layout going. Now we also had a piece up on here going around. Now it'd be way easier to do this in hard ops, obviously, because we could just come in with a, or not hard ops, but with the box cutter, we could just come in with like one of those knife cutters and make it. But in this case, unfortunately, the easiest way I can think of to do this is with a manual cut. So I'm going to press the K key, press C, cut down. C basically makes it cut straight, and then if we press the Z key, that'll cut through. So we're going to do that. Then we're going to cut over. Then we're going to cut up, click and press enter, and now we have this. So what we need to do is make sure these vertices here are beveled with Control Shift B, scroll this up, and then press the C key to make sure it clamps. And here we're going to have an overlapping vert because this merged at one point, but we need to select everything, press M, and then by distance, and that's going to merge two vertices, as you can see, into one. And now what we can do, if you wanted to make this, you know, move farther down, you could simply, you know, bada bing, bada boom, take this and move it down. But I'm just going to, I think it's fine where it is, Control click around. And on this one, to, you know, make it solidify, we're going to have to duplicate it with Shift D, P to separate by selection, and then add a solidify modifier below it. Kind of pull it out that way. It doesn't have to be too big. Right to about here will be okay. And now we can really get in here, do whatever you need to do. But let me hide this real quick. We don't actually need this geo on here. It's a waste. So what I'm going to do, select these two faces, fill it in. Select these two faces, fill it in, and then we can simply Alt-Shift-click in edge mode to dissolve out these edges, and we still have this nice little piece here without extra geo. Awesome, so let's drop a chamfer on this guy, which means we're probably going to have to, we can remove this boolean and apply the solidify, and now we simply go around here, control click, and you know what, we'll just do the edges only. Control click around, control B, and there you go. So this is what we've got so far, and this is a really good foundation because it's a very basic and primary detail type of piece. But from this point on, you can really begin to picture how you can make more and more detail to make this thing, 10 times better. So the next thing I want to do before we really hop into any sort of, secondary detail is maybe finish off one of the other pieces we had, which was a circle cut into here and then like a pipe extruding out. So I'm going to go into front view with 1 on the numpad, and we're going to add in, actually I just noticed, I don't think we shaded the main piece smooth yet. Let's do that, make sure auto smooth is on, which it is. Yeah, if you don't shade smooth your cutters, it's going to translate to your piece. So you can either shade smooth the cutter or just reshade smooth the main object, doesn't matter, either way works. But anyways, we're going to go in here and add in a cylinder. Rotate it, scale it, move it up a little bit more will be okay. That'll be good. We're going to go ahead and make sure auto smooth is on, you know the drill. And however long you want this cutout to be is up to you. But I think I'll do this, and then what I'm going to do is, let's make it all the way back. Shift click on this, and then control minus, we're going to have this. And instead of kind of, guesstimating and just repositioning another pipe or a cylinder, what we could do is just use the cutter. Now what we need to do is duplicate this cutter, scale it down a bit, and we're going to need to essentially go in here, viewport display, and then turn off the bounds. We're going to display it as a texture instead. Now this is still going to be a main piece. This is going to be a cutter though, so let's move this to the cutters collection, and this can just remain as a main piece, and we can simply just move it back. Just a nice and easy way to kind of cheat the system a bit. And at this point what I want to do is apply the scale. I'm going to run a few loops in here, control B, let's chamfer this. And then if we just go in here and Alt Shift click, we can take these guys again and E to extrude, right click to cancel, and then Alt S to scale along the normals like that, however big you want them to be. There we go. So it's kind of intersecting with some of the geo here, so what I'm going to do is scale this down until it's right on the inside, and that looks good to me. And now I'm going to turn cavity back on. I guess no, it's still on, never mind. I guess the shadow is kind of tricking me because it's turned off. Alright, so now we have pretty much all the primary detail here, so we can move into the more secondary details here. So what I'm going to do is come in with Shift A and add in a single vert, add single vert, make sure we're in vert mode. A lot of people ask me about this. If you can't move your vertex, you're not in vert mode, obviously. So if you're moving a vert, gotta be in vert mode. So make sure you don't forget that. I come over here, E to extrude down, extrude over. We could even hold control to constrain it, and then extrude down again, and then extrude like that. However steep you want it to be. Select everything, F key, extrude across. Really, really easy stuff. You know the memo by now. Alright, so let's go ahead and run a slice operation with control /. And now we have a little bit of secondary detail there on the front. We can move this to the cutters collection. And let's just go in here and add in some more, little details. So we'll add in a cube, use this as a cutter. We're going to make the cube really, really tiny though. And when I say tiny, I mean really tiny. And I want to come in here and maybe position the cube in this general area. And what I think I'll do is take, if we go into wireframe, we can take these two edges, scale them a bit on the Z, so that way we kind of have something like that. And then as long as this is scaled all the way through on the X, we can simply use this as a difference boolean. So we shift click, control minus, and there we go. We have one piece of detail. And maybe we can add in one more. Let's just go ahead and duplicate this. Shift click, Control minus. Move it up a bit. Maybe down. So that was my phone, by the way. My apologies. And what we're going to do is move these both to the cutters collection. And there we go, some nice little cuts. Actually, it's probably a bit too uneven. Let's just, yeah, let's do something like that. Move to the cutters collection, and there we go. Pretty much finish with those little details. Now, one thing we don't have is a chamfer here on the front. I actually forgot to add that in. So what I'm going to do is Control B to bevel. We're going to make a really tiny chamfer. And what we're going to do is just Control C to copy that width. This is so we don't have to redo it. Actually, it transferred over, so it doesn't really matter. So we'll just leave it how it is. And are we missing? We're missing more chamfer. So if I'm going to chamfer this thing, I might as well chamfer the rest of it because we're going to have to at some point. So I'm just going to Control click all the way around. We could do like select sharp edges, but it might get some we don't want, so I'm just going to do it manually to be safe. Okay. Small chamfer. We're also going to run a small chamfer in here. Looks like the connection points are decent, so there we go. Looks a lot better now. Okay, so onto the front here, in my case the back, you know, 1, Control 1, same thing to me really, just an extra key. Alright, let's go in here and select this piece, and to make it completely centered, we can press Shift S, cursor to select it, and then add in the cylinder. So now what I'm going to do is shade it smooth, turn on auto smooth, rotate this guy 90 degrees, and we're simply going to go up here. Scale it down, move it out, and run a difference boolean. So nothing complex at all. Just kind of move it all the way through, I think. Or that's probably a bit excessive. We'll do that. Tab into edit mode, and we can simply make like an extra design in here. You know, we'll inset, extrude. Now you're going to see it kind of cuts off at a certain point because it reaches that boundary. So we would have to be kind of precise with it. Or you could just apply the boolean, whatever you want to do. You could apply the boolean and work with the geo directly rather than working with the cutter, but we'll just stay non-destructive for now. It's easy enough. Chamfer. Make sure we take that piece, inset. Or do we already have? No, it's just an optical illusion. We're going to inset. Extrude again. Inset one more time. Inset again, and then we're just going to grab this on the y-axis and kind of make just a basic little button like that. I did that all with the cutter so we can move this to the cutters collection, but probably would have been a bit easier if we applied the boolean, but at least we can stay non-destructive here for the most part, as you can see. And you know what, maybe real quick I'll turn the cutters collection back on, Alt-H, and on this piece we could even chamfer that just to make it look a bit neater and turn off the cutters collection. Alright, so a few more details here on the front, or in this case the back, and I think we'll be pretty much set. So I'm going to scale this a bit on the X, make it really tiny, bit on the Z, bit on the X, bit on the Z, just to make it nice and easy. Bit more, and geez, this is really extended. Okay, that looks good to me. So what I'm going to do is shift click and run a difference boolean. Now we're obviously going to want this to be somewhat accurate in terms of where it's presented, so I could duplicate this and move it. Maybe go back here. So I could duplicate and just kind of, you know, guess where this is going to be, or what I could do is simply add a mirror to this piece or to the cutter. I think I'm going to mirror this piece right here. We'll add a mirror modifier. And we're going to choose the, which axis? The x-axis, and we're also going to turn on bisect, maybe not flip, we'll just do bisect. And there we go, now it's completely mirrored over to that side. So I want to add in maybe one more detail. So what I'm going to do is just steal this piece basically. We'll turn on the cutters collection and just to reuse this, we can reset the origin if we need to. Make this a bit bigger. Pull it a bit out. And then run a difference boolean. There we go. Scale this a bit. Alright, now you're going to see it didn't mirror, and that's because in Vanilla Blender it doesn't automatically sort for you. So we're going to need to make sure the boolean is above the mirror. Right? So that way boolean, mirror, and then we're good to go. So what we're going to do is take that and then maybe 2 more notches here on the bottom. So we could use a cutter for this, or I could just, you know, I could probably apply the first boolean at least. So what I'm going to do is, which boolean is it? I don't think this one's affecting anything, is it? Maybe not. We'll remove that one and apply this one, because this one's actually the slice, as you can see. This one's still like the main piece. So if we apply the slice here, make sure we add a separate data user and apply the slice, what we can do is hop down here, run a small little chamfer, make it look a bit neater. Okay, and then we're going to make 2 little notches here on the bottom. So I'm just going to shift right click to move the 3D cursor. That way when we add in a cube, it'll be right here. And wedge cuts are not really complex in Vanilla Blender, just got to be, you know, somewhat accurate with it. So what I'm going to do is take this edge and move it up. And this is going to kind of act like a wedge cut in a way. We could just test it, you know, run a difference, and that should be good enough. And you already know the drill. Make sure your booleans are above the mirrors like that. And then we simply move this to the cutters collection and we're good to go. So that piece up there is finished. We kind of hopped into the more intricate details, but I mean, who cares? It looks good. Alright, so next thing I think I'll do, you know what, let's apply this cutter right here. I'm pretty confident I want to leave it. And what we can do is alt click, alt shift click, small little chamfer there, and there we go. Now we're efficiently done with that part. Right, okay, next thing we'll do is detail this piece. So add in a cylinder. As a matter of fact, let's press Shift S and then add the cursor to selected. We might need to reposition, right click to set the origin to the geo, and then Shift S cursor to selected. And now what we can do is take the cylinder, shade it smooth, and turn on auto smooth. And if we simply rotate this 90 degrees, we have this, and then we just, you know, move it through, run a difference boolean. And what we could do if we want to keep it completely non-destructive is run a reverse bevel. So that way, instead of having to apply the boolean to run a chamfer around here, we can do it with a cutter. Makes it a little bit more versatile because we can adjust things at any point. Now I'm pretty confident I'm not going to adjust it, so I could apply the boolean, but I think it's cool to show you reverse bevels in Vanilla Blender. So what we need to do a reverse bevel is first run a bevel on this front face. You're going to see it bevels the wrong direction. So what we need to do is go to Alt N, and we're just going to flip that. And we might need to, you know what, before we do that, let's just do it right off the bat, because it might cause some problems. And then now that we have reverse normals, the normals are going to bevel in the opposite direction, hence the name reverse bevel. And then, yeah, we're good to go. Let's also mirror this, so add a mirror modifier. We're going to choose bisect, and there we go. So let's make the smaller detail up here in this piece as well. So what I think I'll do is add in a single vert for the cutter, go to vert mode, and then move it on the X a bit. Move it over here, and then start extruding. So we're going to press E to extrude and hold Control just to kind of keep it even. Maybe to, this should be okay. Extrude up this way a bit. Extrude again. Select everything, A, F, and E. And you're going to see the normals are incorrectly oriented. That's because I have face orientation turned on. I get this question a lot. How do I keep the face orientation red but everything else gray? Really easy. You go to Edit and then Preferences, and under the Themes, you go to 3D Viewport, and under Face Orientation Front, just turn the alpha down to 0, and it gets rid of it. I just don't like the blue effect. I don't really care for it. So what we're going to do is select everything in Edit mode, Shift N to recalculate, so that way the cutter's normals orientations are good. And then of course we'll run a slice operation right here to get that. Now we are going to get some shading errors right here, but those are things we can easily fix later on down the line, but what we could do is move it down a bit to make it a bit more even and subtle. Alright, so one last thing I want to do on this slice. Let's first move this to the cutters collection. I'm just going to add in one more single vert. I think it'll be easier this way. Vertex mode and move it over a bit. Okay, so I'm just going to come over here, extrude it up, extrude it over, extrude it down kind of arbitrarily, fill it, extrude through, and then we're just going to use this as a simple difference boolean to get that. And in my opinion, it's a bit too much. Let's move this down so it's a bit more subtle. We could even rotate it to make it more consistent. Make sure it's not showing anything. You can kind of see that area, but I mean, does it really matter? Probably not. You're not going to see that. So move that to the cutters collection. And yeah, that piece is basically finished. Now you're going to see the auto smooth didn't quite pick up here because the angle threshold is probably a bit too high. So if we just drop this a bit, you're going to see in this case the maximum area here, or I guess the lowest in this case technically, hit 15-ish degrees. Anything higher was not caught, so the angle between these edges here seemed to have hit just about 15. We'll just put in 15 to keep it even. So that kind of indicates if we use an angle limit method in the bevel modifier, we're probably going to need the same exact value for the bevel modifier. It's all about angle degrees and just, you know, the angle between edges in terms of how the shading looks. So yeah, just make sure you have that set to an appropriate value. Now if this was like any lower, like really low, then we're going to get issues like this because the auto smooth won't pick up these. So if this was like really steep, you'd probably have to mark it sharp manually. So if I had to go like, you know, super low to catch it, instead of what I do is just leave it where it was before and then simply go in here, Control E, and mark a sharp that way, and you can kind of do it like that and manually tell Blender what to do. But in this case, 15 degrees doesn't seem to be hurting anything. Alright, so this thing is looking good, no complaints here. So let's go ahead and detail the front. So what I'm going to do is select this and then Shift S, or before we do that, before we Shift S that piece, let me scale that down a bit. I think that's a bit too big, isn't it? Or we can move it manually. You know, I don't like guessing, so we'll do that. I think that looks good anyways. And then what we're going to do is Shift S and cursor to selected, or first of all, origin to geo, and then cursor to selected. So now we can add in a cube right in the center of this piece here. And what I'm going to do is simply scale this a bit on the y-axis, scale it a bit on the z, move it out, and let's Control A to apply the scale. And I'm just going to go in here and bevel all these edges here with Control B, scroll up, C to clamp it, and then we'll just of course merge the duplicate vertices. Okay, so that's probably a bit too small for my liking, so I'm just going to go in here and invert mode, just pull these down a bit more to make it bigger. That should be fine. We'll go ahead and shade it smooth and then auto smooth. Pull it up a bit more. Okay, so what I want to do is just come up here and rotate it. We're going to put one about this area. Or you know what? I want one to be straight over here, so we'll put one in this area first. Shift D to duplicate. Let's rotate it. Let's see, R135, R160. No, you know, we'll just kind of do it arbitrarily. We're going to do that. And then to mirror this piece perfectly, I'm going to go ahead and add a mirror modifier, choose this piece as the mirror object, and then turn off X and turn on Z, so that way it's completely mirrored. And then we can simply apply the mirror modifier and join all these pieces together and run a difference boolean. So now we have this, which looks pretty cool. Now, like I said, reverse bevels are your friend, so what I'm going to do, now reverse bevels need to be right against the mesh, otherwise they're not going to actually hit the mesh, as you can see. So let's go over here. As a matter of fact, Alt-N to flip it, and you're going to see nothing happens. That's because we need to make sure this is moved over really, really close. Control-B to bevel. And yeah, there we go. You could make it go back more maybe, so you can just box select the back ones. Just move it back a bit more. Yeah, that looks good. And then I'm simply going to move this to the cutters collection. We'll add a mirror modifier to this piece. Like I said, you can either mirror the cutters or you can mirror the object itself. Doesn't really matter, all up to you and what you need to do. So I'll add a mirror modifier. We're going to choose X and then bisect it as well. And now we have it on this side too. Alright, so this piece is really beginning to come together, and hopefully you've actually learned a bit in terms of how I would approach this in Vanilla Blender. So real quick, we are missing a little gap up here that I think would be cool. So I'm just going to drop this in real quick. You can probably just watch what I'm doing and get it done really, really fast. So we're going to do this, Control minus, move this to the cutters collection, and there we go. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and make that little ring around here with the bolts and whatnot. So this is going to be a bit tricky in Vanilla Blender, but nothing that we can't handle. So to do this, we're probably going to need to make a, for now, you know what, we won't make a duplicate yet, but we will add in a cylinder, shade it smooth, and then turn on auto smooth. So I'm going to rotate this 90 over the Y. And I want to make this fairly big, but not too obnoxious. So let's scale it down to about here. That should be okay. And to do this, we're basically going to need to obliterate this mesh. Usually in hard ops or box cutter, I would use a knife cutter tool and just get it done off the bat, but in this case we can't. So what I'm going to do is take this piece and duplicate it, Shift D, and then right click, and right off the bat I'm going to go ahead and apply all the booleans. This one we're going to discard in a second, so it doesn't matter if we destroy it. I'm going to go ahead and shift click on this and isolate these two, and what we can actually do is come in here and run a slice operation. So now we have this, and my approach would be to first of all separate data user so we can apply that, apply the boolean, and now we can simply take these faces here and steal it. So I'm just going to duplicate this face, Shift D, right click, P, and then separate by selection. Really annoying in vanilla, I know, but what else are you going to do? So at this point we can just delete out all this extra garbage we don't need, and now we have this piece. And you probably already know what I'm going to do. I'm going to either extrude it or add a solidify modifier. Now before I do that, let me go ahead and select this and Control X to dissolve that. And then what we could do, what in the world? Do we have like duplicates going on? Merge by distance. Merge by distance, let's try 0.0002. 5. This one's not catching. 0.001. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to dissolve this and then Control Shift B to chamfer that. And dissolve that as well maybe. Okay, so let's go ahead, solidify this to about here. There we go. Alright, and then I want to add in some little bolts around here. So we're probably going to have to do a radial array, unfortunately, but it's part of the game. So I'm going to add in a cylinder. We're going to go ahead and shade it smooth and then auto smooth. Rotate it 90, and there we go. So radial array in Vanilla Blender, really annoying but not difficult. So what we're going to do is add in an empty object. You can also go into local like I am. And what we want to do is add an array modifier to this, and basically by default it's just going to array in a static direction. Might as well apply the rotation and scale so that way it stays. And as you can see, this array is in a static direction. But we don't want this. We want to array around something. So we're going to turn off relative offset, turn on object offset. We're going to choose the empty, and nothing's going to really happen unless we move it, right? So what I'm going to do is, first of all, go back into global view, and this will just make things a bit easier. I'm going to take the empty and the cylinder and make sure they're moved out. So my plan is to simply move this empty until it's over here. We'll scale this down a bit in edit mode. That should be enough for a bolt. Big enough, right? Let's move the empty. Okay, so if I were to rotate this right now, nothing's going to really happen. But we know where this piece is positioned, so what we can actually do is, we figure out exactly where this piece is going to be positioned, and then what we want to do with that is, this is probably like the best solution I have for this one. I'm going to apply the array. I'm going to apply the array, and then I'm simply going to move this empty back over here to the middle roughly. And now what I want to do is, with this piece, we don't need this extra cylinder in the middle. I'm going to get rid of that and take this piece, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then we're going to make sure that origin point is still at the cursor. So now we have this. This is just, there might be a quicker way. Maybe I'm not doing the most efficient way, but I never have to do this in vanilla, so I'm just showing my approach. But basically, we're kind of getting the idea. So now we just need to make this the pivot point. So we're going to add another array modifier and turn off relative offset, object offset, choose the empty. Now we're good to go. Okay, so this is exactly what I was going for. So we don't want to move that, but we do want to move this, increase the array amount. Let's do like 5. And then we're just going to move this one over here and reposition the origin to the 3D cursor and just kind of rotate it like that. I think I'm going to do 5 of these, which we do have right now, and then scale it down a bit in edit mode. So I mean, I think you guys understand why I use hard ops now, right? It's just a no-brainer. But there we go. That is my solution. It's annoying. Maybe I did it inefficiently. I don't know. I'm just showing you how I would approach it in Vanilla Blender, which I never use. So okay, what I'm going to do is add a mirror modifier. We're just going to mirror that to the other side. Now as long as the origin's in the center, it should mirror just fine, but if it's not, you can simply, Shift S, cursor to origin, and then origin to 3D cursor, and you'll be fine. Okay, so we have that. We also want to mirror these guys, so add a mirror modifier and origin to 3D cursor, and there we go. Okay, so I do want to champ for the front ones. What we can do, just select them manually, or what you could do is select one and then Shift G and choose coplanar. Just and if you add more geo, it might select the incorrect area, so just be careful when you use that command. So there we go. We have a nice chamfer on the front, and we're getting near the end. Really, we don't have too much left to do. What we do need to do is add in some more detail on this pipe and add in a bit more detail here on the front with some sort of circular pattern. Alright, so I want to go in here, and basically we have this piece, right? We could probably just apply the boolean at this point. Separate data user, apply it, there we go. So what I think I'm going to do for this detail that I want is, let's take this area, you know what, Alt-Shift click, and then Alt-Shift click. We're going to duplicate this with Shift D, P to separate by selection, and then let's add, actually let's not add a solidify yet, let's first just deal with the detail. Actually, you know what we're going to do, we're going to press Control X to dissolve that, and let's also come in here, Alt-Shift click, and delete out these faces. We don't need these, we don't really need these either. Okay, cool. So now what I want to do is make sure these are all roughly square, and on this piece now we can add some loops here to make these square as well, and then add some loops here to make these square as well, And all we're going to do is subdivide. This will subdivide very nicely because there's no rounded edges or n-gons or anything. So we'll do one or maybe two of these. I think one will be enough. And then all I want to do is go to, first of all, we're going to have bad shading. So it might be a good idea to make a duplicate of this piece. And on this duplicate, we're just going to call this normal transfer, N transfer, because you're going to need to transfer the shading. You'll see why in a second. We'll just turn that off. But on this piece, what I want to do is go to select, checker deselect, and deselect all the boundaries, which are going to cause issues if we have these selected. So we're going to do that, and we need to turn these here into circles. Now, if you saw my add-ons tutorial, or maybe, no, it wasn't the add-ons tutorial. I did a vanilla tutorial recently, and I showed the vanilla way to add in these circles without hard ops. So you might think you go to loop tools and then circle, but that's not how it's going to work in here. That doesn't actually turn vertices into circles. So the best way I found is to press Control-Shift-B. We're just going to add in one of these and make these as big as we want. And what we need to do is first of all increase the segment count, but you're going to see it kind of like collapse inside. So what we're going to do is turn the shape to like, it's probably like a perfect value, like 0.1 should be enough. Also isolate this. So now we're going to have that. Let me undo that. Try again. We're going to scroll up a few times to make the resolution higher. This should be good enough. And these still aren't really circular, are they? Let's try. You know what? We'll leave it at 0.1, and then what we can do is try loop tools. I'm not sure if it'll work, but yeah, it actually worked pretty well. So if you turn on loop tools, you can actually make these into circles. Another reason it might have this problem is because the scale's not applied, so maybe what we'll do is undo that and then apply the scale, and then maybe it'll work even better. There we go. Now we have perfect circles. Perfect. So what we're going to do is X and then delete those faces there. There we go. And all I want to do at this point is add a solidify modifier, so I'm going to kind of pull this back. We're going to need to shade this smooth and make sure auto smooth is on. I think we just need to increase the value to like 30 again. Okay, so now we're going to need to run a bevel on this at some point. Might as well do it now. So what I'm going to do, just see how this looks, pretty good. I want to add the bevel modifier now just to get rid of the issue. So we'll add a bevel modifier. We're going to turn the segment count up to 3. Drop the amount a bit. Make it just very subtle. Let's try 0.002. That should be a good value. Let's shade it, or turn on hard and normals to clean it up a bit. Shading is still pretty bad if we were to really take a look. You're going to see it also bevels these insides, I think. Does it? Are we set to angle? We're not. Turn on angle. It'll be even better that way. But if we go into matcap, we're probably still going to have bad shading. Let me see. If not, we might be okay. Actually, the shading is pretty good. It is a bit warpy though, so what we're going to do to fix it somewhat is apply the solidify and apply the bevel. Unfortunately, we have to go destructive on the bevels. We're going to go to select all by trait, faces by side, and set this greater than 4. And now all we need to do is assign a vertex group here, and we're going to use a data transfer to transfer the normals from that duplicate piece we made. So what we need to do, I also realized on that duplicate piece we didn't add a solidify. We might have to do that, but add a new vertex group and click assign, deselect and select. There we go. And you know what? Real quick, let's take note of the size of the solidify. Negative 0.013. Keep note of that, and then we'll come back in here, and there we go. Just make sure this vertex group is assigned. And then what we're going to do with that vertex group is add a data transfer modifier. We're going to choose the normal transfer object with the vertex group. And then what we need to do is, it's not going to work right now because on the normal transfer, we need the normal transfer piece to be in the exact same position as this one. So we're going to add a solidify modifier, apply the scale with Control A, add a solidify, and I think I said negative 0.013. and now it's perfectly aligned. So now if we were to work on this, we're going to go to face corner data, custom normals, and then projected face interpolated, and now our shading is perfect. See the difference here? Before, after, before, after. It's really smooth and clean now. Perfect. Alright, so a bit tedious in Vanilla Blender, but nothing we can't handle. So there we go, have some detail on the front. And we're pretty much almost done. The last thing I think I want to add on this piece is some detail over here on the pipes. So for the pipes here, what I want to do is come over here. I'm going to press, actually, I don't think I'm going to change this anymore, so we can just go ahead and press Control A, Visual Geo to mesh. We're going to have, it's going to be a bit too much. Maybe not. Maybe we'll just duplicate it, remove the subsurf modifier, and then Visual Geo to mesh on the duplicate. And basically what I want to do is take this bottom area and press Control plus on the numpad a few times. That'll be good. Then what I want to do is Control I to invert the selection and then delete out the faces. So now we can take this piece, Control 2 to subdivide it, and simply add a solidify modifier. Let's put it on the top. Subsurf is going to kind of hit that as well. So you know what? We'll apply the subdivision and then just solidify like that. What we're going to need to do is turn on auto smooth. There we go. And I want to do a similar thing here to what I did for the front. So to do that is really quite simple. What we're going to need to do is make a duplicate for our normal transfer. We'll call this normal transfer N transfer 2. And then on this piece, I'm simply going to, let's see, apply the solidify. We already have a relatively square piece, and we're not going to see the whole thing. So what I'm going to do, select it. We're going to go to vert mode, but it's going to actually select these as well, which will be problematic. So it might be a better idea to Alt-Shift click these areas to delete out the faces, and now we can simply select this with L because it's separate and delete those out. So I'm going to do that. Yeah, let's do that. Select everything and then checker deselect, and we're just going to deselect the, what in the world? There we go. Bottom and top. And then just like we did before, Control B, Control Shift B. It should still retain the data from last time. Delete that out, and then add a solidify modifier, and simply pull it inwards like that. Pretty cool. Alright, so let's apply the solidify, or maybe just add a bevel, whatever you want to do. We're going to have to apply it anyway, so we'll do that. We're going to make sure the scale is applied with Control A. And then we're going to add a bevel modifier, set to angle. 3 segment should be okay. And we'll try 0.002 to make it tiny. And let's turn on hard and normal. So now we have a pretty small one. It's still too high. 0.001 should be good. And just like before, shading is really bad, especially on this piece. What we need to do is apply our bevel, select all by trait, faces by sides greater than 4 vertices, assign a vertex group, and then data transfer. So now you pretty much know the drill. We're going to choose that normal transfer to object, vertex group, face corner data, custom normals, and then projected face interpolated. And this one's actually going to work without having to solidify the other piece because this one's already overlapping in the perfect spot and the other one wasn't. So in this case, there's no need to add a solidify modifier. It's not going to help us. So now we have perfect shading on that guy. And last thing I want to do is, let's duplicate this once more with Shift D, remove the subdivision, and then apply Visual Geo to mesh. And then same thing we did at the bottom, we're going to expand the selection a few times with the Control plus on the numpad, Control I to invert, and then delete out the faces. So now we can just re-add that subsurf and then simply solidify it just a bit. We'll turn on our auto smooth, and we're basically finished now. This thing is looking pretty good. Actually, there is one thing that I missed, and it was some little notches over here. Not really a big deal, but I think it looked cool. So we're just going to add in a cube, and we're just going to make some very, very simple notches in this area. So we're going to bring it in, and what we could do is maybe take these two edges and scale them on the Z like that. Duplicate it down, and then just run a difference boolean. Really simple, not really a big deal, but let's take these two, move it to the cutters collection. I just thought these little details like that look pretty good, so why not add them in? Alright, so now that this piece is finished, all we really need to do is add some bevels, and the bevels can be the most annoying part, especially in vanilla, because we can't just press the Q key and be done with it. We have to do all the manual settings. So I'm going to go in here and just start with this one. We can leave the mirror or apply it, doesn't really matter. I'll apply it. Let's add a bevel. We're going to choose angle. We're going to make the segment count about 3. Harden the normals, and then just make the amount really, really small, so that way we have a slight bevel just to capture the light. And instead of doing the same thing to every single piece and adjusting the settings, we can actually turn on an add-on called copy attributes. And if we go in here and type in copy, you can turn that on. And then what we can do is simply select one piece without a bevel, and then select one with a bevel, Control C, copy modifiers, and then bevel, and then just transfer it. Now keep in mind it's going to retain all the same settings, including the amount. So if you want to adjust the amount, you're going to have to select it and do that on your own accord. So just keep that in mind. So I'm probably just going to do the copy strategy to all of them because it's quicker. So copy a bevel to this one. That's probably a good amount. This one we might have a bit too much, so the clamp, it looks like the clamp kicked in this one, and it's still too tiny of a bevel in my opinion. So I'm going to turn off clamp overlap. We do get some overlaps, but I do want a bit bigger of a bevel, so I don't know where it's overlapping on here, but I can't see it, so I think that's good enough. For the main piece especially, we're going to need a bevel. So we'll do that. And like I said, the bevel amount is going to need to be changed, so let's change the angle to 15 on the bevel as well. So that way, you know, like I said, auto smooth and bevel angles will pretty much go hand in hand, so make sure that's done. Let's see what else we're missing. This one right here. We'll go ahead and copy. That one's done. Same for this one. Actually, since we're doing the cheating way of using an inset boolean, we're going to actually have to take this piece and union it to this guy, but we need to make sure this piece is actually on the inside. So we're going to scale a bit on the Y, or move a bit on the Y, and then move a bit on the Z maybe. It might be problematic that some of that's on the outside, but we can try. Control plus to union, and let's put this boolean above the bevel. And it looks like it picked it up pretty well. We do get a little bit of weirdness over here with those triangulations. So what we can actually do in the bevel modifier is go to geometry and change the outer miter type to an arc. I think it looks a bit nicer. And then move this to the cutters collection, even though it's not really a cutter, but who cares. Same idea for this one. Okay, we're going to need to, you know, it's fine. Shift click on this, Control plus on the numpad, and then make sure that your boolean, which is the new union, is above the bevel. And we're going to have that. As you can see, we have a nice little transition around there as well. Looks pretty good. Now I want the bevel to be a bit bigger, so let's turn off the clamp. And I'm not sure where the issues were, but if they're not appearing, then we're pretty much okay. Move this off to the cutters collection, and then one more, which is actually a few more, which are these pieces. Shift click on this, copy the bevel. That looks good. And then this one, copy the bevel as well. It's a bit too much on that one. apply the scale just because. And there we go. We also need to union this piece, so shift click, control plus, and then it's really easy stuff. All we're doing is just reorganizing the modifier stack. Now we have a nice little fusion right there, as you can see. Move this to the cutters collection to get rid of it. And then what else are we missing? This front one we did, and that one's good. I think we got just about everything. We're not going to be joining anything together just because it's a render, so that kind of saves us some time. If we had to join everything together into one piece, it would probably be a bitch to do because we'd have to change up the, the angle limit methods would be different between each of them, and it would all have to be combined into one. It would just be annoying, so yeah. Okay, so for this one, we can just, add in a bevel. Looks good on that one, and then this one already has a bevel. And we'll do one more bevel on that guy. Let's see, let's apply the scale so that way it catches better. And there we go. So at this point we should have a bevel on everything. Last one, as you can see, there's not really a nice bevel fusion between this piece and this piece. So what we need to do is remove the bevel off this one here. Reason being is because if we have a bevel on one, then union it to another one with a bevel, we're going to get overlapping bevels. So if we're unioning a piece to another piece, just remove the bevel on the piece we're starting with. So this one, shift click here, control plus, and then make sure the boolean is above the bevel. And now we have a nice fusion on that piece, which we can, just use for aesthetics. So I think we have a bevel on everything in here, so it just looks a bit better, kind of makes it pop a bit more. And this piece is practically finished. So this is how I would approach this piece in Vanilla Blender. So what I'm going to do next is make a render out of this. We're going to do a render and then post-process it, none of which I discussed on YouTube anyways, so you're getting a bit of a bonus there as well. So let's go ahead and take care of that. Alright, so let's go ahead and hop on this rendering. Let me turn screencast keys back on. Usually I split up these recordings, so sometimes the settings aren't as they were before. So alright, there we go. So let's go ahead and add in just a plane, just a very simple plane, because usually that's what we want to put our object on. So we'll do that. Press S to scale it up, and you don't have to make this thing super massive, just enough to kind of get the point across. So we're going to do that, and we'll worry about the backdrop in a little bit. For now, let's go to our materials panel, and what I think I'll do is change the lighting from the default over to my HDRI. Now I use the abandoned slipway. Most of you are familiar with this. You can get this on HDRIhaven.com for free. If you want to install a custom HDRI to preview in your materials instead of rendering, all you do is you go to, I believe, the settings panel here, and you just install one in this menu. So yeah, you can just change to really whatever HDRI you like. I prefer to use the abandoned slipway for most of my scenes, but really all up to you. Okay, so we need to add a material now. I'm just going to call this material floor for obvious reasons. And then what we can do is just make a nice metallic floor, drop the roughness a bit, drop the color, and we can also give it a bit of clear coat. I think clear coat always makes it look a bit nicer, and we can always ramp up the roughness a bit until we have just a very, very subtle amount of clear coat. See the difference there? I think it looks better. So at this point, we can go ahead and start adding materials to this little device here. Yeah, I think it's just best to get that out of the way before we start dealing with backdrops and just general rendering. But if you're impatient, you can load up your HDRI here in the world panel, and then you can simply go to your rendered view, make sure you're in cycles, of course, and then you can kind of view it. Not going to see too much until we add materials though, so let's go ahead and do that. So I'm a big fan of using the big 3 or the big 2, whatever you want to call it, and that's just using 2 or 3 primary materials on your object. Usually it comes down to about 3 depending on the object. On this one it'll probably be 3 as well, we'll see though. But yeah, bare minimum you want to have like a nice variation to make it look cool. So I can already picture what I want right here. I just want a simple silver material. So we'll just add a new material, make it metallic, drop the roughness a bit, and then drop the base color a bit as well, so we kind of have something like that. You can also adjust the specularity. Now technically you don't really want to adjust this, but for artistic purposes it's probably okay. I'm just going to leave mine on 0.5. For the main piece here, I want this to be a darker material, so we can just add a new one. It's of course going to be metallic because I am just a fan of metallic. It always looks better in my opinion. Drop this a bit. Okay. And maybe give it a little bit less roughness, so around here will be okay. And then for the front we're going to choose that silver one. For this we're going to choose the silver one as well. The more you do this stuff, the more you can kind of picture exactly what type of contrast you want going on, so don't forget that. This one we'll do I want a new material? Not too sure. We could try it. We could just try maybe like a simple rough material. Give it like, I don't know, something like this. You can even make it like red or something if you wanted to get crazy. And just have like a cool little piece up there on the top. I don't know, just a nice little focus point, I guess. This one's definitely going to be silver. Looks good. The pipes, we can maybe make that more of like a rubber. We'll hold off on that for a second. When I say the big three, I mean 3 primary materials. Sometimes you'll have other objects and materials that won't really be a primary one. Like this will probably be an exception because it's just a simple detail we're not going to reuse. So yeah, that's pretty much what I mean. We're going to go here, silver. We'll try both on this one. We'll just do silver for now. This one we'll do silver. It's really all about finding that nice balance of contrast and figuring out what looks the best. And you just start picturing things after a while. So we'll do a silver one for that. And maybe for this guy right here, we could try the red. Would the red look cool? Nah, not really. We'll just make a new custom one. Very simple, like a rough type of thing. You can imagine it's like a rubber or something. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. Alright, so we pretty much have our materials added. You can go in here and customize this however you want. I would recommend it actually. Actually looks cool, a little bit less roughness there. There's the before, there's the after. Kind of has a nice sheen on the top, doesn't it? You could even pick that up a bit more by adjusting that sheen setting, but let's see, just a very, very subtle effect. Look at the top there. The sheen is basically the light that kind of hits the top. So if we go up, you can kind of see it's very subtle, but it does make a difference. So maybe we can add in some sheen to that. I don't know. I'm sure there's like physical rules to it, but when you're an artist, you can kind of bypass those if it looks cool, in my opinion. Alright, so let's go ahead and hop into our rendered view and see how this thing looks, because it should look a lot better in rendered view, of course, and it most definitely does. Not too sure how much I want to leave the red. It does look good, and we're just going to have to make sure it picks up with a decent focus point. We can always adjust that again later. It's not really a big deal at this point in time. So what I want to do next, before we worry about the lighting and how the lighting's hitting it, because right now the lighting is hitting from this direction, so it's basically coming in from here and probably hitting somewhere on the front, which isn't too bad depending on the angle. But what I do want to do is hop in here, add in another plane with Shift A. We're going to rotate the plane 90 degrees and then rotate it 45 degrees, or negative 45, and then we're just going to kind of do something like this. Just whoops, YY, scale it on the Y twice, and just kind of find a good location for where we might want our camera to be. So it depends really. Do you want a back view? Do you want a side view? Do you want more of a front view? All these different factors are going to depend and determine your final result in your render. So as you can see, when I'm facing this way, it doesn't catch as much light in this camera angle compared to if we were over here, for example. So in this case, I kind of do want to render from this angle, so what we're going to have to do is rotate the HDRI and also move this plane. So let's first of all add in a camera to kind of lock in this position. So I'm going to press Shift A, camera, and if we press Control 0 on the numpad, that'll lock in the camera, and then if you press 0 on the numpad, you can go in and out. And then if we press Control Alt 0 on the numpad, what this is going to do is align the camera to this view. Now don't worry about really where it's positioned, we'll adjust that in a bit. But what I want to do for now is rotate this 45 or 90, move it over here instead, and now we can just pretty much press the 0 key on the numpad and hop right back into our view. So that's step 1. Step 2 is getting that HDRI rotated so we get some better light. So I'm going to pull up the shader editor here. We're going to go to World, and we're simply going to rotate this HDRI until it's hitting at a better direction. You can see as I increase this, the more it begins to rotate. So if I go like really high, rotates all the way around. Most of you have experience with this. So yeah, just kind of rotate this until you find a good position. It might be a good idea to actually move your camera back a bit so that way you get a full view. We can always tweak this again later. Maybe like right here would be good, right? And then just kind of adjust the HDRI until we find a good position. So that's good. We can also rotate this around the Z-axis, and what I like to do is when the corners are kind of, biased in one direction, you can kind of tell that the floor doesn't look right. So what I do is I detect the corner, which is right here. We're going to rotate around the Z until it reaches the middle roughly, and then I like to just go in here and go into vert mode and simply bevel the vertices with Control-Shift-B and just really give it a good amount of segments in here. I just prefer to do this. It's personal preference, I guess, and you can kind of see it's nice and rounded now. And I also want to go for some sort of infinite backdrop, and you can actually do this with a little trick that basically it adds like some sort of contrast between the metallic and the dielectric materials to make it look like an infinite backdrop when it's actually not. I don't know if there's like a certain phrase for this technique, but I use it all the time. So what we're going to do is just select the backdrop here, and what we need to do is first of all add a new material, make sure it is not metallic. It's going to be a big no-no. And then what we want to do is pretty much match the color of the material with the color of the floor. Now it's important that your floor is metallic and your backdrop is dielectric, meaning non-metallic. So I'm just going to go in here and really drop this right until we find that like middle ground where it matches. You can kind of see the more we do that, if we turn on render region, kind of simulates an infinite backdrop, but the issue here is it's really dark, so we might as well make the floor a bit brighter so that way it lightens up the scene. We'll also go in here and do a similar effect, and now you can kind of see that backdrop is pretty much completely gone. So this is good. Now you do want to make sure you're not picking up any borders. Sometimes it might look like it's an infinite backdrop when it's actually not. Like even a slight variation can bring the backdrop back out. So you just gotta make sure you're in that right position, and I think I found it here. So what I'm gonna do I want this brighter? Let's see, maybe I'll make it a bit brighter. I don't know. I'm trying to think of how I want this. Let's just yeah, let's make it a bit brighter. So we'll just make sure it's deselected. Slowly scroll up, and yeah, there we go. Now we have a pretty good camera angle and a pretty good backdrop. I also really like the reflectivity on the floor. It looks pretty cool, and we could move the camera some more if you want. It's all up to you. For now I'm pretty happy with this, but we might need some room for text in Photoshop, so perhaps you want to move it over a bit more, or maybe even find like a different camera angle even, depending on what you're going for. I was happy with that one. But yeah, it's really all about finding that good rotation, good angle. The most simple changes can really make all the difference, so it's all up to you and kind of how you want it. You can make it like more profound like that, which might change up the look of the backdrop, so I'm not going to do that, but you get the point. I also think I'm going to go back for that silver material. I'm not too sure I like that little variation I had. This looks a bit more natural to me, in my opinion, but you can do whatever you want, of course. Alright, so at this point you can make any additional tweaks you need. You can render if you're done, tweak up the backdrops, tweak the materials, tweak the HDRI. There's not too much left to do. So what I think I'm going to do is maybe mess with some more materials off camera, see if I can find a little bit of a better type of view of the of the materials here, but I think it's pretty good where it is, so you don't have to be too picky with it, but sometimes it's good to mess around and see what you can get. So once you're happy with your result, you can go ahead and just render this thing out. Now most of you are probably familiar with the render settings and what you need to use, but In the case you're not, I'll quickly go through them. So in the compositor, you're going to want this set up right here for the sake of denoising. You don't need glare unless you're using emissive lighting, which we're not. So if you don't have these options, or the denoise option at least, you need to make sure you go in here in the render layers and turn on denoising data. That's important. And then you just connect it up like this. All these nodes here are in the filter panel, the denoise and glare in the filter panel. Okay, so we have that. Now the next thing we need to do is make sure our samples are pretty high. 200 should be okay. I'm using a graphics card to render. The light paths here are generally good for what you need. And of course the tile size depends on what you're using, CPU or GPU, and also the tile size depends on your system. So once you're done with that, you can go ahead and press the F12 key to render, and then give it a few seconds or minutes to render out. So I'll just go ahead and pause the video while this thing finishes up. So here's the render, guys. Looks pretty good. Now we're going to go ahead and bring this guy into Photoshop. You might notice you can see some of the border. You can easily mask that out with like a healing tool or a clone stamp tool in Photoshop, but don't worry too much about that. Let's go ahead and save the image. Make sure you're saving as a 16-bit TIFF. Very important to retain quality. And we'll just call this device. And then we'll just go ahead and bring this guy over to Photoshop. Alright, so here we are in Photoshop. So what we need to do right off the bat, or at least what I like to do, is press Ctrl J to make a duplicate layer here. And once we do that, we can just go up here to the camera raw filter and make some quick adjustments. It's really easy to do. And you can also press Alt or hold Alt and scroll in or out to adjust this. Let me put this into frame. Going to be a little bit off, but not a big deal. Okay, so we can bump the exposure a bit. 0.05 or something, 0.1, 0.15, whatever. Shadows you can bring up or down. We'll bring those up a bit. And sometimes I like to increase, oops, that was the highlights, wasn't it? Either way, I like to increase the highlights as well, so we can just do both. Alright, and then I'm just going to go ahead and lock that in, and as you can see, kind of makes it pop a bit more in my opinion. It might be a bit too bright, but I think it's just the difference in the monitor I'm using, so it should be okay. Let's go ahead and go back to the camera raw filter. We're going to go over here to the paintbrush tool and simply paint in some texture and clarity. Just paint over it. Now make sure you increase the sliders, but mine are presets, so something like that will be enough. We'll click OK, and as you can see, that really makes it pop a bit more, brings out some clarity to it, and in my opinion just makes it a bit more robust and clean looking. Alright, next we want to do some color variation. Now you can do this a few different ways, but the vanilla way to do it in Photoshop is probably to use the color lookup tool. So we're going to go here to this little menu and go to color lookup, and then we're going to go to this little load 3D LUT and just kind of scroll through them. There's a bunch of different ones and presets you can use, but you just want to be careful because it might bring out this border some more. We're still going to try our best to mask it though. So for now, let's just get a good little something here and just find one that we like. This one's pretty cool. I might go with a Fuji F125. Let's see what else we can find. Okay, let's go with that one. That one looked pretty cool. You can always do like color balancing and stuff to make it look even better. So there's that one. Maybe what we'll also do is come in here and just quick and dirty color balance to adjust the blues and things like that, just to make it pop a bit more. See the difference? We can also bring out some of the highlights as well. Something like that will be okay. Really, it's whatever colors you like. Now what I want to do is also mask out this border right here because it's slightly visible. Won't be perfect, but we can probably use the clone stamp tool to mix it up a bit. So I'm going to add a new layer here, and we're going to go over here to the clone stamp tool. Now if we hold Alt and left click, this allows us to sample. So if I sample from right here and start painting, so what I'm going to do is just combine all this into one layer, shift click and press Control Alt Shift E, and now it's just one layer. And what we can do is use the clone stamp tool to kind of mask out this border here. Well, that's not the right term, we're not masking it, but we are going to make it look kind of blurred together so it looks natural. So we're going to go to the clone stamp tool, And if we Alt and left click, you're going to see that allows us to sample from certain areas. Now, in this case, we want to sample from around here. Then if we kind of paint that in, what you're going to see, it's very subtle, but it begins to kind of, you know, hide that. It's very, very small. You don't want to sample from here, like I said. You just want to keep going around here and trying your best to kind of mask that. I can barely see it anymore, so I'm going to go over here. This is just a quick and sloppy way to do it as well, but it gets the job done. I can't even see it anymore. I can see a little bit over here, so we'll just keep going and just sampling. You could probably use a tablet for this to speed it up. And we're also going to go over here and do something similar. Let's just make sure we're not sampling too harshly. Maybe start over here, so that way we're not going into the device. And just pick this up as well. But you get the point. Now we can't really see that border at all. It's basically unnoticeable unless you really zoom in, like right here. There's a bit more you could pick up if you really want to get down and dirty with it, but probably not necessary. So there we go. This piece is looking really good now. I'm pretty happy with it. So maybe we'll do a bit of vignette and some contrasting and whatever else in a little bit. But the vignette for now I think would be a good idea. So we're going to go back to the camera raw filter, go down to effects, and then drop the vignette a bit. Just a very, very slight vignette to kind of bring in attention. See the before and the after. Looks really good. And then we can go over here and add in some text. You can make it whatever you want, so maybe make it some sort of sci-fi name or something cool for the device. So maybe I'll do some sort of name. I usually just come up with these on the spot, something cool and you know, spacey sounding, maybe like Rara Interstellar. Just something cool. We'll adjust the color a bit, make it so it's, you know, either one or the other. We're going to do like a white one. I think that'll look the best here. Control T to move it. I'm going to go over here. And then below it, I'm going to put something for the actual device. Let's do a different font. By the way, these are all fonts you can get at like dafont.com or really wherever. I just have these saved over time. So I think I'll do a different font here. Not for that one. Just for a new text, and I'm just going to type in, let's see what I could do, portable fuel unit, fueling unit, whatever, fueling or fuel, let's do fuel. We can always adjust it again. Let's try Expansiva, see if that one looks cool, and then kind of, you know, hold shift and make this a bit more congested to make it look cool. I don't like how this is positioned, so let's move this and make this one here a bit smaller. There we go, not too bad. And then in the bottom corner we're going to put our name. It's always good to mark your name, so we'll do my name, Josh Gambrell, opacity, and then we're simply going to move it over here. Control T and then scale it down a bit. Jeez, I always hate having to move these things. There we go. So that's a good spot for this. This is still a bit too convoluted in my opinion, so I don't know. I'm just going to try to mess around with the text and where it's positioned. We could also make this a bit more squished, so we'll go to Control T and hold Shift and kind of make this, it's a bit more profound in my opinion, so really whatever you want. We could try making this on a separate line as well. See how that looks. Now it looks awful, so maybe not. Really it's just kind of trial and error, figuring out what looks good to you and the type of effect you're going for. I kind of want these to be near each other though. I think this looks the best. Maybe we could come in here and make this a bit darker as well. We could do like one of these, portable fuel unit, but make that in like a black color. Just have some nice contrast, or it's really all up to you and what you want. I think maybe we'll do, because it's kind of harder to see in a way. Let's see how this one looks in a darker color. and how this one looks in a lighter color. Get in here and then go to white. I don't know. I think I like the other way around, but something about it just seems off. So what I think I'll do is make the top one just more silver-ish, or maybe not. That's still kind of off, isn't it? We'll do that, and then for this one, we'll make this a white color. This is just me being really picky, so don't, overthink it. And I really want to try finding like a better line positioning for this. Maybe if I put it together and then press enter, this will be kind of like, I don't know, a bit better, so there's more room to scale it up. So we could try that, move this down. Yeah, that's a bit better, so we'll do that. And then maybe put that one right in the middle. Just trying to find a good composition, really. There we go, this looks pretty good. I ended up changing the name just because the name, I don't know what it was more an intuitive thing. I didn't like it, so I swapped to a different name, and this kind of looks a little bit better in my opinion. And I also kind of like the composition of how this text here is positioned, so just find a good spot. Don't make it like super high up in the corner, otherwise you'll have a bunch of empty space, but make sure you have a fair share of empty space and populated space. So that's it for the tutorial, guys. So hopefully you enjoyed the January vanilla tutorial, and make sure you watch Ryu's add-ons one. I know most of you guys said you watch both, so hopefully you enjoyed that one as well. So until next time, I'll see you in February, or if you follow me on YouTube, which I assume most of you do, probably in the next few days. So thanks a bunch, guys, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.